This is Judges 11. In the last chapter, Israel put away their foreign gods and called earnestly on Yahweh to deliver them from the Ammonites. Yahweh's soul was grieved for their misery, for their suffering under Ammonite domination, so he assembled Israel and Ammon against each other in Gilead. They're getting ready to do battle. But before the fighting starts, the text will take us back in time a little bit to tell us the origins of Jephthah, the next judge. Verse 1. Now Jephthah the Gileadite was a mighty man of valor, and he was the son of a prostitute. Gilead became the father of Jephthah. Gilead's wife bore him sons. When his wife's sons grew up, they drove Jephthah out and said to him, "You will not inherit in our father's house, for you are the son of another woman." Comment: Jephthah was a mighty man of valor and the son of a prostitute. Sometimes the toughest and most street-smart of men were raised in harsh conditions. His father was Gilead, which is also the name of the region, and also the name of one of Manasseh's grandsons who lived hundreds of years ago, Numbers 26:29. Since his mother was a prostitute, it raises the question, how did Gilead know he was the father? Maybe his mother was a reformed prostitute, or maybe she only became a prostitute afterward. But more likely she was a prostitute all along, because verse 2 speaks of Gilead's wife as being another woman and of Jephthah's mother only as a prostitute. One thing's for sure, at or around the time of Jephthah's birth, Israel abandoned Yahweh and did not serve him. They were serving any and every god but Yahweh, Judges 10:6. So when we take into account the circumstances of society as a whole at the time, plus the personal circumstances of Jephthah's mother being a prostitute, it's unlikely he grew up with much instruction in the history of Israel or the law of Moses, or that he had any good examples in the home. But Yahweh will still use him. All of us are imperfect tools in Yahweh's hands. We all fall short of the glory of God, Romans 3:23. But no one should feel unworthy of walking down the aisle of any church because God cleanses, Isaiah 1:18, quote, "Though your sins be as scarlet, they shall be as white as snow," end quote. And if someone in the church rejects such a person, he's guilty, Romans 15:7, quote, "Accept one another, even as Christ also accepted you," end quote. But in verse 2, Jephthah's brothers didn't accept him. They drove him out and disinherited him. Verse 3, then Jephthah fled from his brothers and lived in the land of Tob. Outlaws joined up with Jephthah, and they went out with him. Comment: Jephthah became the leader of a band of outlaws in the land of Tob, which is a place we can't identify, but it's probably some lonely place in the eastern desert without enough of a population to establish law and order. So Jephthah's a shady character, to say the least, but he's a mighty man of valor, as it says in verse 1. Shady but brave and rugged, and he'll be the next judge of Israel by God's choosing. Verse 4. After a while, the children of Ammon made war against Israel. Comment: now we've caught up with the end of chapter 10. Israel and Ammon are assembled in separate camps, getting ready to make war on each other. Verse 5. When the children of Ammon made war against Israel, the elders of Gilead went to get Jephthah out of the land of Tob. They said to Jephthah, "Come and be our chief, that we may fight with the children of Ammon." Comment: Israel wants Jephthah to lead them in battle. He's brave, and that's all that seems to matter right now. Verse 7. Jephthah said to the elders of Gilead, "Didn't you hate me and drive me out of my father's house? Why have you come to me now when you are in distress?" The elders of Gilead said to Jephthah, "Therefore we have turned again to you now, that you may go with us and fight with the children of Ammon. You will be our head over all the inhabitants of Gilead." Comment: Jephthah says, "Why are you calling on me in your distress?" The elders answered, "Because of exactly that. We're in distress. We're in a tough spot. You're all we have. You will lead us in battle, and you'll be the head of all the inhabitants of Gilead," meaning head of all Israel beyond the Jordan. Jephthah can't believe his ears, and he wants him to say it again as we go to verse 9. Jephthah said to the elders of Gilead, "If you bring me home again to fight with the children of Ammon, and Yahweh delivers them before me, will I be your head?" The elders of Gilead said to Jephthah, "Yahweh will be witness between us. Surely we will do what you say." Then Jephthah went with the elders of Gilead, and the people made him head and chief over them. Jephthah spoke all his words before Yahweh in Mizpah. Comment: in other words, Jephthah's taking on the job before Yahweh, sort of like the inauguration of a president with his hand on the Bible. He's taking this as a sacred obligation. Coming up, as he moves on to his duties, he'll try the diplomatic approach with the Ammonites. Verse 12. Jephthah sent messengers to the king of the children of Ammon, saying, "What do you have to do with me that you have come to fight against my land?" Comment: Jephthah has given the Ammonites an uncompromising message. This is our land, go away. Verse 13. The king of the children of Ammon answered the messengers of Jephthah, "Because Israel took away my land when he came up out of Egypt, from the Arnon even to the Jabbok, and to the Jordan. Now therefore restore that territory again peaceably." Comment: This king of Ammon says, "It's not your land, it's ours. You took it from us 300 years ago. Now we want it back." And by the way, that's false history, as Jephthah is about to point out. Verse 14. Jephthah sent messengers again to the king of the children of Ammon, and he said to him, "Thus says Jephthah, Israel didn't take away the land of Moab, nor the land of the children of Ammon, but when they came up from Egypt, and Israel went through the wilderness to the Red Sea, and came to Kadesh, then Israel sent messengers to the king of Edom, saying, Please let me pass through your land. But the king of Edom didn't listen. In the same way he sent to the king of Moab, but he would not, and Israel stayed in Kadesh. Then they went through the wilderness and went around the land of Edom and the land of Moab, and came by the east side of the land of Moab, and they encamped on the other side of the Arnon, but they didn't come within the border of Moab, for the Arnon was the border of Moab. Israel sent messengers to Sihon, king of the Amorites, the king of Heshbon, and Israel said to him, Please let us pass through your land to my place. But Sihon didn't trust Israel to pass through his border, but Sihon gathered all his people together and encamped in Jahaz and fought against Israel. Yahweh, the God of Israel, delivered Sihon and all his people into the hand of Israel, and they struck them. So Israel possessed all the land of the Amorites, the inhabitants of that country. They possessed all the border of the Amorites from the Arnon even to the Jabbok, and from the wilderness even to the Jordan. Comment: That's the correct history, which is in accordance with what happened 300 years ago in the book of Numbers and Deuteronomy. This was all during Moses' time, and Moses recorded it, Deuteronomy 31:9. Basically, when Israel left Egypt, it took them almost 40 years, but they eventually arrived on the east side of the Jordan River. They came peacefully, but the Amorite king Sihon attacked them. That was Sihon the Amorite, not to be confused with Ammonite. In response to that attack, Israel killed Sihon, all his people, and took all their land. That's how Israel got this land. They took it from Sihon the Amorite, not from the Ammonites. It includes everything from the Arnon River on the south to the Jabbok River on the north to the Jordan River on the west. It's doubtful that Jephthah knew all that history, but he had time to compose the message with the help of people who did, maybe some Levites. Now Jephthah continues his message, verse 23. So now Yahweh, the God of Israel, has dispossessed the Amorites from before his people Israel, and should you possess them? Comment: Jephthah says, Why should you possess the land? Before we had it, it belonged to the Amorites, not you. Yahweh gave it to us. Verse 24. Won't you possess that which Chemosh your God gives you to possess? So whoever Yahweh our God has dispossessed from before us, them we will possess. Comment: Jephthah is making this a contest between the god Chemosh and Yahweh. Jephthah goes on, verse 25. Now are you anything better than Balak the son of Zippor, king of Moab? Did he ever strive against Israel, or did he ever fight against them? Comment: That's more history. Balak the king of Moab knew better than to strike Israel. He feared Israel rightly because he witnessed what they did to the Amorites. Numbers 22, 2 and 3. Verse 26. Israel lived in Heshbon and its towns, and in Aroer and its towns, and in all the cities that are along the side of the Arnon for 300 years. Why didn't you recover them within that time? Comment: Those were the Amorite cities that Israel took from Sihon 300 years ago. Israel's been living in them ever since, Joshua 12:2. The Ammonite king is trying to revise and reverse 300 years of history. Jephthah goes on, verse 27. Therefore I have not sinned against you, but you do me wrong to war against me. May Yahweh the judge be judged today between the children of Israel and the children of Ammon. Comment: That's a public call on Yahweh, verse 28. However, the king of the children of Ammon didn't listen to the words of Jephthah which he sent him. Comment: It's not surprising. It's difficult to change the minds of people who are filled with fake history and inspired by false gods. Verse 29. Then Yahweh's Spirit came on Jephthah, and he passed over Gilead and Manasseh, and passed over Mizpah of Gilead, and from Mizpah of Gilead he passed over to the children of Ammon. Comment. In other words, when the king of the Ammonites didn't listen, Jephthah rallied his men and led them to confront the Ammonites. Now coming up, sometime before or during the attack, he vowed a vow. Notice exactly how he put it. Verse 30. Jephthah vowed a vow to Yahweh and said, If you will indeed deliver the children of Ammon into my hand, then it shall be that whatever comes out of the doors of my house to meet me when I return in peace from the children of Ammon, it shall be Yahweh's, and I will offer it up for a burnt offering. Comment. According to the NET Bible translation notes, that's probably the accurate translation, that Jephthah will offer whatever comes out of his door as a burnt offering, the first animal or person. However, there is a possibility that it should actually be translated, quote, it shall be Yahweh's, or I will offer it up as a burnt offering, end quote. In other words, if it's a human, he'll dedicate that person to Yahweh. But if it's an animal, he'll offer it as a burnt offering. So Jephthah might or might not be vowing to perform a human sacrifice. But how could he vow to offer a human, or isn't he? The explanation should take several things into account. First, livestock animals might be allowed to go in and out of the house, so he might expect it to be an animal. Second, Yahweh was very clear in the law of Moses, there should be no human sacrifice, no human burnt offerings. Yahweh said, do not learn to perform sacrifice in the manner that the nations around you sacrifice, quote, for they even burn their sons and their daughters in the fire to their gods, Deuteronomy 12:31. Also, Yahweh specifically said that burnt offerings should come from the herd or the flock, Leviticus 1:2, and in the rest of chapter 1, burnt offerings should only include cattle, goats, sheep, turtle doves, or pigeons, so it's completely unlawful to offer a donkey or a horse, for example, much less a human. So if Jephthah had in his mind to offer a human as a burnt offering, he was completely ignorant of the law. Ignorance is certainly a possibility or even likely, but most definitely Yahweh would not be in agreement with human sacrifice. Also, according to the alternate translation of the vow, which says, whatever comes out shall either be Yahweh's or he'll offer it as a burnt offering, then if a human comes out of the door, it shall be dedicated to Yahweh. It turns out that Jephthah has an only child, a virgin daughter, so she would be the only person that he could possibly dedicate to the Lord. Certainly he couldn't dedicate a wife because she was already dedicated to him, and he couldn't dedicate anyone outside of his own household because he'd have no provenance. So the daughter's the only one he could have had in mind. And according to the alternate translation, he's vowing to dedicate her to Yahweh in some other fashion other than being a burnt offering, if indeed Yahweh gives him victory, and if indeed she's the first to come out of the door. Regarding an alternate way to dedicate the daughter, other than giving her as a sacrifice, we do know that women served at the tent of meeting, Exodus 38:8 and 1 Samuel 2:22, so that might be what Jephthah had in mind in case it was the daughter who came out. We should say two more things. First, a vow before Yahweh is a very serious thing in Israel. Quote, when a man vows a vow to Yahweh or swears an oath to bind his soul with a bond, he shall not break his word. He shall do according to all that proceeds out of his mouth, Numbers 30, verse 2. But if a person has vowed to do something sinful, it would be doubly sinful to fulfill the vow. For example, if someone says, I swear I'm going to kill you, he sinned by making the vow, and he had sinned again by carrying through with it. Verse 32. So Jephthah passed over to the children of Ammon to fight against them, and Yahweh delivered them into his hand. Comment, victory, verse 33. He struck them from Aroer until you come to Minnith, even 20 cities, and to Abel-cheramim, with a very great slaughter. So the children of Ammon were subdued before the children of Israel. Comment, now Jephthah comes home, verse 34. Jephthah came to Mizpah to his house, and behold, his daughter came out to meet him with tambourines and with dances. She was his only child. Besides her, he had neither son nor daughter. When he saw her, he tore his clothes. Comment, the tearing of clothes is a sign of great distress. Still in verse 35, and said, Alas, my daughter, you have brought me very low, and you are one of those who trouble me, for I have opened my mouth to Yahweh, and I can't go back. Comment, he says, I vowed a vow, and I can't take it back. If he intends to sacrifice her, he should take it back. But why vow at all? Clearly he regrets it now. He was trying to purchase God's favor, but we know that Yahweh intended to deliver Israel anyway because Yahweh's soul was grieved over Israel's misery, Judges 10:16. So the vow served no purpose. Verse 36, she said to him, my father, you have opened your mouth to Yahweh. Do to me according to that which is proceeded out of your mouth, because Yahweh has taken vengeance for you on your enemies, even on the children of Ammon. Comment, she's supporting her father in the vow. Verse 37, she said to her father, let this thing be done for me. Leave me alone 2 months that I may depart and go down on the mountains and bewail my virginity, I and my companions. Comment, it's clear at this point she'll never marry, but it's not clear why. Is it because her father will dedicate her to Yahweh's service, or because she's about to die? Either way, she wants some adjustment time before it happens. Verse 38. He said, go. He sent her away for 2 months, and she departed, she and her companions, and mourned her virginity on the mountains. At the end of 2 months she returned to her father, who did with her according to his vow, which he had vowed. She was a virgin. It was a custom in Israel that the daughters of Israel went yearly to celebrate the daughter of Jephthah, the Gileadite, 4 days in a year. Comment, we can't tell for sure what Jephthah did, whether he dedicated her to the Lord in some sort of lifetime service or did the burnt offering. If he did the burnt offering, he was completely and catastrophically ignorant. I prefer to think she entered Yahweh's service. Jephthah has an honorable mention in the Hebrews Hall of Faith, Hebrews 11:32. So whatever he might have done wrong, it seems Yahweh overlooked it. Without faith, it's impossible to please God, and Jephthah overcame all his other faults with faith. It took extraordinary faith to step up in the name of Yahweh to do a task which no other man had the bravery to perform. Jephthah was very imperfect in our eyes, but that's not the way God looked at him. Rather, God says the world was not worthy of him, Hebrews 11:38. That's the chapter. Judges 12 is next at landofhavilah.net. Judges 12. This is the map of Judges 11. Gilead especially refers to the mountains here, but around this time the term Gilead could refer to any of the lands of Israel across the river. The land of Tob was probably in the eastern desert somewhere. Ammon was in this area. To this day we see the name Ammon reflected in Amman, Jordan. Edom was the country here, and Moab was the country here. 300 years before, under Moses, Israel camped at Kadesh about here, then went around Edom and Moab without bothering them. But when Moses and Israel crossed the Arnon River here, the Amorite king Sihon attacked them. Big mistake, because Israel defeated Sihon and took all his land, which went from the Arnon River here to the Jabbok River here to the Jordan on the west side. There were some pockets of Ammonites in that area, especially to the east. Israel did not bother the Ammonites, so Ammon had no historical claim on the land in question. The battle with Ammon started somewhere in Gilead. Jephthah struck them to Aroer, here on the edge of the Arnon Gorge, and to Minnith and Abel-Cheramim, which are unknown locations. He subdued them. Judges 12 is next.